Deno, Deno, Dino, Bun. I don't really care how it's supposed to be said, but I do care about their new release because Deno 2.0 is actually quite exciting. So let's break it down. And not just Deno 2.0, by the way, because this comes with another very exciting release alongside it, which is the stable V8 bindings for Rust. Rusty V8 is super, super cool, and we'll talk about why as we go in. The Deno 2.0 release candidate. We've been planning a new major version of Deno for years. Many times it seemed imminent, but we realized the features we wanted would require more work. Now it's finally happening. Last month, we released the final 1.x version with 1.4.6, and today we're cutting the release candidate for 2.0, which includes everything that we expect in the final release. This is the largest update since 1.0, with major changes like the introduction of Node's process global. We've also made some philosophical shifts, like preferring Deno install over the now deprecated Deno cache. Read on for the full list of changes and share your feedback. A quick bit of context, because I've seen more and more people who don't know this. Deno was created by Ryan Dahl, also known for creating Node. He created Deno because there were things that he regretted in how he designed Node that were too late to change. And he made Deno originally as a proposed example of if he could undo the things that were done wrong with Node, what it could look like. He gave this awesome talk at JSConf 6 years ago, 10 things I regret about Node.js, in which he lists 6 things he regrets about how he built Node. Yes, the title is not accurate. There's only like 5 or 6 things, but it's a phenomenal talk. And Deno is a reordering, N-O-D-E-D-E-N-O. You get the joke. It was meant to be reorganizing Node, or even denoding, so to speak. But yeah, this is a really interesting video, especially now, because half of it is him talking about how great Go is and how he's using Go for Deno, which ended up being entirely built on Rust instead later on. But it's fascinating. Highly recommend watching this if you haven't. But we're not here to talk about what Deno could be. We're here to talk about what it is and where it's going, which are very exciting things. We got changes to the global variables window and process. We got dependency management, which is finally a real thing, because previously, if you didn't know this about Deno, the way you would import was with URLs. So if you're using modules, you can literally import them straight from the URL. So here we're importing Pascal case from https deno.land/x/case/mod.ts. A big part of this is he wanted to be able to avoid needing a package JSON, and Deno was built to be more like the browser. But eventually they added a Deno JSON, which is different from a package JSON, but is somewhat supported by, it's a whole mess. But initially, Deno was trying to avoid a lot of the things like the dependency management hell that many of us were in. But now they're back in it because they're going full support, which I honestly think is probably the right call, because adopting Deno felt impossible because its compatibility was on a package level, not a project level. So if I wanted to move a project to Deno from Node, it was hell. We'll go through all of these one at a time. So if you want to see all of them, make sure you watch the whole video. So we have the changes to global variables. We introduced the window global in Deno 1 with the goal to make Deno as browser compatible as possible. Fortunately, the window global variable becomes a source of problems for lots of users. Many libraries check if they're executed in the browser by probing for window. This is super common. I'll often check if window is available to decide if I should do something or not, because if window is available, I'm on client. If not, I'm on server. This led to a class of bugs in libraries that would otherwise work in Deno due to window being globally available. Deno started to discourage the use of window globals in version 1.40, suggesting to use global this or self instead. Global this is dope, and more should probably use it in more places, but yeah, right decision. In contrast, the process global has been widely requested. While it has been possible to use process by importing it from node:process for a long time, many popular frameworks rely on its presence in the global scope, often used in configuration files. Although adding import process from node process seems simple, it often causes friction for users of popular frameworks that would otherwise work seamlessly in Deno. I know something like Next.js, for example, had a couple of these assumptions about having access to node globals that didn't end up being true, and this is the work they're doing to address those types of things. So the addition of process as a global, you can expect a lot more code written originally for Node to work with Node changes in Deno. However, we still encourage users to prefer explicit imports. Thus, a new no process global lint rule was added that will provide hints and quick fixes in your editor to use an import statement instead. I like that. Explicit imports are nice. I hate magic globals so much. Dependency management. Deno 2 comes with several new features that improve dependency management. The Deno add subcommand now handles specifiers with a subpath. So if you add JSR:@std testing snapshot, failed to parse the package, invalid version requirement. Now with 2.0, it will just add the newest one. There's another thing that Deno is really strict on is the versions. So you have to put the version in the URL, in the add command, everywhere. So you're more knowledgeable of what version you're running. But that made onboarding obnoxious. Now it'll just add the latest when you run the add command, as it probably should. Package with the format scope name will start with add. Oh, it just like barely worked for NPM stuff before. Now it just handles it. Dope. Using the JSR or NPM prefixes is now required when adding dependencies to avoid potential ambiguity between packages with the same name in both registries. That's interesting. I understand, but it's annoying. For those who don't know about JSR already, it's a new package registry that was built by the Deno guys that works with Node and Deno, and I believe Bun as well. That's goal was to make it easier to publish and manage your packages. It has built-in TypeScript support. It has built-in like documentation based on your type definitions and shit. It's a very different way of doing packages, but it's awesome they're putting the effort in to improve one of the most painful parts of Node, which isn't Node at all. It's just NPM. And now they are making sure both are supported properly, but now the catch is you have to include this whenever you're installing an NPM package. That's going to make tutorials so annoying. If your project contains a package JSON file, Deno will prefer adding NPM dependencies to package JSON rather than Deno JSON. Interesting. So if you have a package JSON into Deno JSON, NPM modules will go to the package JSON instead. You can also add dev dependencies to package JSON using the --dev flag. Deno add --dev, cool. Deno install now supports the entry point flag, which allows you to install all dependencies from a given module. Interesting. So if you point Deno at a specific file, it will download all of the things that that file and its imports need and none of the rest. It's actually really cool. If I have like a gigantic project and I'm just working on this very small subset, I don't have to wait for everything to install. I can just grab this part. Huge. Very huge. A new Deno remove subcommand has been added to quickly remove some of the deps. Fine. And they have a new lock file. That's huge. As someone who bounces between Bun and PNPM a lot, I hate the lock file in Bun so much. So much. It breaks when anything is changed. With PNPM, the lock file is such a consistent format that they often diff fine. So like when there are two pull requests that are changing package versions or installing new packages, they can both merge without conflicts, which is unbelievable because conflicts in package lock are just like the known pain of doing JavaScript correctly. And PNPM's format is consistent enough that it just goes away. So yeah, nice that they're going in that direction. This looks like it'll diff fine, so that's huge. And most importantly, they've improved the error messages, providing helpful hints for common issues like incorrectly formatted relative import paths or missing dependencies when using bare specifiers. So this one needed JSR in the front, which is why it failed. I do like that when something's being imported from a package like host, it will always have a prefix like this in front or an HTTP. I like that I have like a mental model for knowing when I'm reading if this imports from my code base or not, based on having those prefixes. That is nice. The fact that you have the same syntax for importing from a package and importing from your own code base is weird. And I do, now I think about it more, like this separation. They overhauled the permission system. I don't know if you guys know this, but permissions is one of the coolest things in Deno. If you run a random package or a random file, like a JS file with Deno, and it's doing things like accessing your file system, it will just fail. It will outright just fail. If you want it to work, you have to specify permissions in the Deno runtime. You have to say with like flags you run Deno with, like, hey, I give you permission to touch my system. I give you permission to access the internet. By default, it doesn't have those. Now, if you don't have the right permissions, it will raise an error inside of Deno instead of it being like an OS level error, so you can catch it inside of the code. That's pretty cool. And now you'll get a special error, requires read access to readme.md. Run again with the allow read flag. Nice. Bunch more permissions changes. We don't care about those. Read into them if you're interested. Links in the description as always. Escape commas and file names. This is weird file name things like this have driven me insane. I've dealt with hell with that. Cool, they changed it. I want more of the cool things changing. Web GPU APIs are now stable. They no longer require the flag. Deal open. Cool. Touch breaking changes. CLI changes. What do we have here? The bundle command. Oh, bundle's actually really cool. I'm going to contextualize the Deno bundle command in a weird way. I'm going to show you the NCC package by Vercel. We've all seen packages that bundle your JavaScript into the most efficient version of it. So if you want to take your package and make it a single JS file, others can import or whatever, there's a ton of tools for that. But what if I want to be able to execute it? What if I want to be able to have all the dependencies bundled in as well? What if I want to make things an isolated single piece that I can guarantee run? If you've used other languages like, I don't know, C, we have tools like GCC that allow you to take all of the code, all the things you've done, all your dependencies and whatnot, and bundle it into a single executable that you can just run. NCC was built by Vercel in order to make it easier to bundle things like Next.js into a single file starting point that includes everything you need without having to have all of those as subdependencies that would be pulled in by the user in the end. It just bundles it all into one file. It does still spit out a JS file though, so you need Node to run it. What Deno is doing is similar, but it goes one step further. Deno bundle brings in Deno as well. So you have a single standalone executable that you can run on any platform. So instead of Deno run mycompiledfile.js, it's just /mycompiledfile.exe or whatever other end, like file end you want. But it lets you have a single file output that is the standalone executable to run the thing you built, which is awesome for things like distributing your code. I would kill for this in Python. I would actually probably be doing real Python work if it was possible to distribute in a way that didn't make me go insane. Like a huge part of why the AI revolution is happening on servers is because all the code is in Python, and getting that Python code to run on someone else's machine is literally hell. Node 22 is also starting to include support for this. Yeah, the single executable applications. Feature allows for distribution of a Node application conveniently to a system that does not have Node installed. Work is being done, but Deno was there a lot earlier. You get the point. It's cool to have a command you can run to make an executable that you can send to people who don't necessarily have Deno or any of these other things. Sadly, they're deprecating it, as they say here, but they're going to implement a new built-in bundler, so look out for updates for that. So, cool. Sad it didn't work out in its initial version. Excited to see where it ends up going, though. Import assertions are dead. Long live import attributes. Interesting. One of the cool things that Deno had was the ability to specify the type of the thing being imported. So if you import it from JSON, you could specify that it is JSON. That way, if somebody puts a different file here, you don't get screwed. Apparently, it was assert, now it's with. The reason for this is that the proposal's undergone major changes, including updating the keyword from assert to with. It's being renamed to import attributes. Additionally, some browsers have already unshipped support for the import assertions. Interesting. It's cool that's coming to the browser, but Jesus. It's actually really important in the browser because if you're importing from a random URL that isn't yours and you're expecting JSON and somebody swaps that out to JavaScript, you can get fucked. And this helps prevent that. Really cool. Node.js and NPM compatibility. Here's where the real important things start to happen. The most important point, and this is probably the one that makes things work for people where it might not have before, is improved CommonJS support. Deno bet real hard on ESM. I understand. ESM's the future. We should all be working towards an ESM future. But a lot of packages aren't there. Packages that might not be that popular, like, I don't know, Next.js, still are very heavily CommonJS packages. Or, I don't know, React, also still CommonJS. It's important to support it well. They have historically focused on ESM, but now they're going to have better support for CommonJS too. Since this is 1.0 release, Deno has prioritized ES modules as the primary module system, offering only limited support for CommonJS through manual creation of require. Import, create, require from node module. Require is create, require, import meta URL, require, yeah. This is how you would force require the CommonJS behavior as like a backfill. While we firmly believe that ES modules are the future of JS, the landscape in 2024 still includes numerous libraries and projects relying on CommonJS. Despite Deno's robust handling of CJS libraries over the past year, users occasionally face challenges when integrating CommonJS, particularly within their own code bases. In Deno 2, several improvements were made to help working with CommonJS modules and make transitioning to ES modules easier. Things like Deno run index.cjs. You can just run CJS files. That's cool. Not quite as good as like the way Bun does it, where you just use both indexes and it figures it out, but progress is being made. Deno can now import CommonJS files, provided that they're using the CJS extension. They do not look for a package JSON file or a type option to determine if it's CommonJS or ESM. That's a little annoying. They're not relying on the package JSON, which has been the standard for this for a while. But at the very least, you can change the file name and you're good. Also, they support require in ES modules, or they support requiring an ES module. So if you have an ES module file and you're trying to use it in CJS, you can require the CJS way to interop in both directions. They have better errors for when you're dealing with CommonJS. Cool. This is interesting. Bring your own node modules is the default. For a while, Deno did not support Node, specifically NPM, at all. Now it's changing. Very interesting. Very interesting. The Bring Your Own Node Modules functionality was introduced in Deno 1.38. While we still strongly advocate to not rely on local node modules directories, a lot of existing projects and frameworks operate on assumptions that this directory will be present. Sometimes you still want to have a local node modules directory, even if you don't have a package JSON, like if you're using a framework like Next.js, Remix, or Svelte, or when depending on NPM packages that use the Node API, like DuckDB, SQLite 3, and ESBuild. To improve compatibility, if a project contains a package.json file, Deno will expect that the node modules directory will be set up manually. In previous Deno releases, you could use the node modules dir flag or node modules dir option in the config file to tell Deno if the node modules directory should be created or not. Deno 2 changes the configuration option. It's no longer a Boolean, but rather an enum with 3 options. You can configure file it with none if you want. It's the default for Deno first projects, which are projects that don't have a package JSON. It automatically installs dependencies into the global cache and doesn't create a local node modules directory at all. This is what they recommend for new projects. But if you're on an old project or you're using Next or any of these other things, and you have a package JSON, you're trying to incrementally migrate, now it will have the right default. Auto is another option that you have. It automatically installs dependencies in the global cache, and it creates a local node modules directory as well in the project root. This is what they recommend for projects that have dependencies that rely on node modules directly, mostly projects using bundlers or ones that have NPM dependencies with post-install scripts. Makes sense. And then they have manual mode, which is the default for projects using a package JSON. This mode is the workflow that Node.js uses and requires an explicit installation step using the Deno install or npm install or pnpm install commands, or any other package manager. That's what they recommend for projects using Next or Remix, Svelte, Quick, etc. It's recommended to use the default none, yada, yada, you get the idea. Cool stuff. It's nice that they have paths for all of these options and helping people migrate over, because most JavaScript projects have been around for a bit now. And as cool as it is to start new ones with the new thing, it's a lot cooler if I can use the new thing on old stuff. Once again, great progress has been made in terms of Node API compatibility. I've been to hell and back with Node API compatibility. If you guys didn't know this, Cloudflare is not Node API compatible. They're getting there. They're adding more and more features, but it's still far from 100%. I've ran into so many weird problems. Things like the CUID2 package, I could just not get working forever. And it was so annoying, so annoying. But these things are being fixed because Node's crypto support is now much more flushed out. Huge. The amount of things that use the Node crypto module is insane, and the way it gets polyfilled if you bundle it in React is stupid. Async local storage is now more performant and reliable. Huge, because a lot of libraries rely on that for server-side stuff. Detect port and port finder are now supported. Huge, super useful, especially for the like, why can't I use this port? And showing you the errors, those types of things. Also, really useful tool Mark showed me recently, Port Manager. This shows you all of the things that are reserving ports on your machine. It's a raycast extension, and it's made my life a billion times easier. If I can't figure out why 3000 isn't working, I can kill it straight from here. And now if I go to my terminal where I had left that project open, it got killed. It's so useful. It's been a life changer. So if you, like me, have too many projects and you lose track of them all the time, first off, start using raycast. It's really nice. But yeah, the port extension, the port manager, really, really, really helpful. Whole video about cool things like that I'm using coming soon. Bunch more backwards compat things. NPM Puppeteer is more reliable. That's cool. Oh, Puppeteer. Same with Playwright. Those things both you're getting better at once. Makes sense. Doc tests. That's interesting. Very interesting. If you write examples with JSDoc, you can now type check them. Deno test -- doc will make sure that your examples stay up to date. That's actually really, really nice. That's really nice. I like that a lot. Apparently, this doesn't just type check the example, it'll actually execute and run them. That's huge. That's super, super cool. I love that. You can also execute code blocks in Markdown files. Oh, they might just win on documentation. Like JSR and the doc side might be how they actually win. The maintainability shit there is insane. Also of note, like Deno has a TypeScript, like Deno has TypeScript built in. So one of the big promises they made initially is that they would support TypeScript out of the box. So if you want a new TypeScript version, you usually have to install a new Deno version. These are default settings they've now enabled, which I like. No implicit override is very nice. And use unknown and catch variables. You never know what you're actually catching. Unknown is the right type for that. Deno 2 ships with built-in support for @type/node at version 22 to make it easier to type check code relying on the Node.js APIs. Also very nice. To ensure your compiler option settings are up to date, we've made it an allow list, so Deno will complain and flag it if you use an unsupported option. Good stuff. They have thank yous at the end. But I have a thing I want to dig into, which is the Rusty V8. In case you don't know what V8 is and you watch this channel, not many of you, but enough that I'll call it out. V8 is the JavaScript engine that exists in most browsers, not Firefox and Safari, but all the Chrome-based ones. V8 is the engine, like the pile of C++ code that your JavaScript runs in. And Node was originally meant to be a way to run V8 on your machine, so you could have like a CLI that runs JavaScript. You don't need a browser for it. It was just taking the JavaScript part out of the browser, the engine, V8, wrapping it with native APIs and things you need on your system in order to allow for you to write JavaScript code that runs on a real server instead of in the browser in an isolated layer. As such, V8 is essential to Node, to the browser, and to Deno. And Deno, in order to maintain compatibility and not reinvent every single fucking wheel, chose to also be based on V8. However, a huge problem with V8 and Node is that it's C++. And that can be really, really rough for a lot of reasons, especially the layer that they had exposed to allow you to access C++ functionality inside of Node. I could do a very, very long rant about the chaos of, what's the name of the thing you have to do a bunch of in Electron? What's the name of the binding that lets you access the C++ from Node? I always forget the name of it. It's a weird abbreviation. It sucks. JIP. Thank you. Thank you, Ronan. Node JIP. I have too much trauma around JIP to forget Node JIP. The history as I know it was that JIP was an experimental future solution being used in Chromium. The Node team wanted to be as synchronized with Chrome and its use of V8 as possible, so they adopted JIP. They had to adopt a lot more because they were doing a lot more native stuff. And then Chrome moved off of JIP because it sucked. And now Node is the remaining JIP user. And JIP is terrible. I know I said to go watch this. If you watch it and then came back, I'm sorry. I have to find a specific moment in here really quickly.
So, yeah, probably the biggest regret is the build system. It's such a pain. Build systems are very, very difficult and very, very important to building projects. Node uses this thing called JIP. Do you guys know JIP? Some of you. If you're writing a module that links to a C library, you use this thing called JIP to compile that C library and link it into Node, right? JIP is this thing that Chrome used to use, but Chrome abandoned JIP for this other tool called GN several years later. We couldn't have predicted that, but that's what happened. And now it's been many years since that happened, and Node is the sole user of JIP. It's a very funky interface. It's like a JSON file, but it's in Python. It's very terrible.
I will emphasize he is right. It is terrible. It is so painful. I had to do a decent bit of JIP work when I was working on Twitch Studio, which was an OBS-like video streaming app that ran in Electron for Twitch, so you could stream video, which meant we had to encode video, which meant we had to do a lot of things in that native layer through JIP, and it was fucking awful. It was so bad. So bad. The Chromium JIP repo was archived in 2023, so it's very formally dead, and the only reason JIP's alive at all is because Node bet on it, and now they're stuck with it. So as Ryan mentioned in that video, the pain of JIP in the build system was his single biggest regret with Node. It's horrible. I see you in chat. Don't want to know how many hours I just wasted to build my Electron app and get some random JIP error. Yep. Story of my life. It's so hellish. It's so hellish. And that was one of the main targets Ryan had in his destruction and rebuilding of Node with Deno. Deno is a modern zero-config JS runtime written in Rust. At its core is Rusty V8, a library that provides high-quality, zero-overhead Rust bindings to V8's C++ API. See that? That's the key. He basically built a JIP alternative for V8 and then built a whole new runtime around it. Over the past 5 years, Rusty V8 has undergone nearly 150 releases, racking up more than 3.1 million downloads on Crates.io. Today, we're excited to announce a major milestone. Rusty V8 is now stable and production ready. While we'd love to mark this moment with a 1.0 release, Rusty V8 is skipping version 1.0 entirely. Instead, we're aligning with Chrome's versioning scheme to stay in sync with V8. The first stable release of Rusty V8 will be version 129.0.0 in line with Chrome 129. This version guarantees API stability, moving us beyond years of 0.x releases, and it solidifies Rusty V8 as a dependable tool for developers building on top of V8. Man, everybody was giving me shit for upload thing being technically version 7 because we follow Semver. They're version 129. They're not that much older than us. I had to make the joke. I'm still mad about that one. I can't believe people are mad at me for following Semver. It's one of the dumbest complaints people have had against me. Anyways, what makes Rusty V8 so special? Rusty V8 gives Rust developers a direct, zero overhead access to V8's C++ API. It stands out for its completeness and seamless integration with high-performance environments. A key feature is Rusty V8's automatic integration of V8's complex build systems into Cargo, allowing developers to easily embed V8 in Rust projects without manual setup. So he made it easy to make a Deno alternative too. That's pretty cool. With Rusty V8, you can build custom JS runtimes, you can run WASM modules, you can leverage the V8 inspector, you can use the V8 Fast API, which is really cool as a way to directly call Rust functions from JS, and you can even manage memory automatically. Huge. Super, super cool. Before we do the origin story, I want to call one small detail out. Notice that the release notes, like the 2.0 for Deno, was written by Bartek and Andy Jang. They're both awesome, had great convos with them. But they're not the people who created Deno. They're employees of Deno. Ryan wrote this. I'm pointing this out because I think it's valuable to know where Ryan's focus is. It isn't in the major version update of Deno. Obviously, he is there to support it, help the team, and make sure it happens. This is where his heart is. He wants a better way to use V8. He loves JavaScript to the point where he will learn and work in much harder languages for long amounts of time to make JavaScript work more how he wants it to. And it's funny, there is no human who has written more code that isn't JavaScript because they like JavaScript than him. And his investment here shows with as simple as he's the one who wrote this. So what's the origin story? The journey to Rusty V8 started in 2015 when I was experimenting with building a JS runtime in Go using a library called V8 Worker. Eventually, V8 Worker was used in the first Deno demo. As I mentioned in the video I was just showing before, this is what he was talking about and demonstrating, all written in Go. He was also very inspired by ESBuild at the time, if I recall. However, as Deno evolved, it became clear that Go wasn't the right fit for the project because of worries that Go's own garbage collection would conflict poorly with V8's. Very interesting call out that the garbage collection between two languages and two environments was annoying enough that a language without it could actually be better. In late 2019, Deno co-founder Bert Belder led the effort to create a direct Rust binding to V8 instead. The challenge was to bind V8's complex C++ API to Rust without compromising on performance or safety. After much effort, Rusty V8 was born, a zero-overhead Rust binding to V8 that provided full control over V8 while ensuring memory safety throughout Rust's ownership model. Really cool stuff. How crazy is it that Rust was able to bind to V8 C++ API without issues, and Rust trying to bind to Linux's C APIs has caused endless fucking flame wars? Why is JavaScript the true Unix? Like, how do we get there where the Unix philosophy failed in Linux and there's a huge war about languages there, but over in JavaScript, it's just like, yeah, we rewrote everything in Rust, it's fine. I just gave Prime. Yeah, I was definitely thinking of Prime as I said that, not gonna lie. Anyways, here's an example of how you can embed JS in a Rust program using Rusty V8. You initialize the platform, you create a platform, you call the V8 initialize platform, and then you initialize overall. You create a new isolate and make it the current one. So again, with V8, you have different isolates, which are places that JavaScript can run and not affect other JavaScript, because the point of V8 and things like it. So I can have a ton of JavaScript running at once. I have like however many tabs open right now. All of these have their own JS runtimes. They're all part of the same V8 engine, but they can't fuck with each other. Very important to get that right. Create a new isolate, make it the current, create a stack allocated handle scope, create a new context, enter the context for compiling and running the hello world script, create a string containing the JavaScript source code. So we create scope, hello world, unwrap, results, run the script, print. You get the idea. It's a lot of steps, but you can manually create, execute, and get the results of running JavaScript code through the V8 engine within Rust. And from here, you can also probably see how things like Deno work. It's cool that they are making this a separate thing instead of just building it into Deno. Like, I could actually see a future where Deno is killed by an alternative written with Rusty V8 that has maybe better node compatibility or something. Really cool stuff. Or actually, I know for a fact it doesn't. One of my favorite banned words in chat that I'm forgetting the name of, the Electron alternative that I get really annoyed about. Tori. Tauri. Tori. Tori explicitly isn't using V8. because they wanted a lighter runtime. So they're using whatever your device has on it by default, or like JavaScript core, which is rough. I am certain a big part of why is how rough it was to bind to V8, but they say it's for performance reasons, and fine. I would love to see a Tory alternative, still written in Rust, but using V8 instead, using Rusty V8. You could make a really compelling Electron alternative with much better compatibility than the existing ones using this. It just got way easier to build a Tory alternative, and one that actually uses V8 too. That's really cool. Rusty V8's memory safety features are a core advantage over the C++ API. For example, in Rust, handles like local T are tied to specific scopes and enforced at compile time. This prevents bugs caused by using or returning invalid handles, something that C++ devs must manage manually. I even ran into this when I was doing shit. Oh God. The idea of like a compiler telling me that I have an unhandled or an invalid handler, just keeping me from dealing with all those weird compile errors. Oh, please make an Electron alternative with this. In Rust, if you attempt to use a local value or a local handle outside of its scope, the compiler will catch the mistake. So here we create an isolate. We have a scope here. Attempting to use local outside of the scope will fail at compile time. So invalid local, let scope 2 has new scope 1, safe to use, will not allow invalid local to be accessed here. Cool, nice and simple. Every 4 weeks, Rusty V8 will upgrade its V8 dependency and bump its major version. This means breaking changes to the Rusty V8 API will only happen when V8 upgrades. The version will always reflect the underlying V8 version. Apparently, they're going to follow Semver, even though Chrome doesn't, which is annoying. Good luck. And they're ready for production. Rusty V8 is now a stable, production-ready library for building high-performance JavaScript and WebAssembly runtimes in Rust. Whether you're creating custom JS runtimes, embedding JS in Rust-backed apps, or exploring server-side JavaScript applications, Rusty V8 provides the flexibility of V8 with the safety and performance guarantees of Rust. I barely talked about the WebAssembly part. I think it's kind of funny that one of the best ways right now to run Go or other native languages in a Rust application is to do it using Rusty V8 in Wasm. So if I wanted to have Go executing safely within the context of a Rust app, I could bring in Rusty V8, compile the Go code to Wasm, and execute it there. That's really actually cool. There's a lot of potential. Like people are going to do... I love when tools like this are made, not because they're going to change everything and revolutionize the world, but the absolute fucking chaos this could enable is so, so cool. And I am really excited to see what weird shit people make with it. So as cool as the Deno 2 release is, the Rusty V8 stable release to me is way cooler. So yeah, that's all I got on this one. I am hyped for this release. I might even go play with it after stream. Let me know what you guys think though. And until next time, peace nerds.